Hey everyone. So we had unfortunately an audio issue on my end, and it ended up getting fully recorded on my camera instead of my microphone. So I just want to jump in and say in this episode of this podcast, I apologize for the audio quality here. It will not happen again in the future episodes. Please bear with us, and I hope you still enjoy the episode, even if the audio is kind of scuffed. Thank you so much, and hope you still enjoy. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fleeting Thoughts, an altered TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jordan. And today we're going to be continuing our lore series. As we described before, we went over the stories of Axiom and their champions. And today we're going to be covering the 3 Bravos champions that have been unveiled.
Yes, this has been a faction that has... I know Gavkin in the community has been really looking forward to this. I think the number one Bravos champion that I'm familiar with, at least he's like in all of our podcasts, always commenting. So I always get him to the front of my mind. Although there are plenty of Bravos champions, commanders out there, we could even say, of the Bravos fan base who. Hopefully we don't disappoint you today in our discussion of the lore, because the lore for Altered is just so... we said this last time, Jordan, but it's just like, it's so deep that it's a little hard. It's a little daunting to dig into it, I feel like. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, there's a lot to digest here. And this time we're definitely more prepared than we were for Axiom going into it. I even read both sets, like all the sets of stories, like twice, I think. And then I have a notepad now of some of the highlights to kind of go over as we talk, so I don't forget any points and I have a better flow. But they're definitely not light on the lore. There's so much more at our disposal as well. In addition to the champions, they have basically an article on anything you could think of. You're like, is there any lore behind this? The chances are the answer is yes. You just got to find it on the site, or it hasn't been revealed yet, because they're still coming out with new articles on various subjects in the world, and I don't doubt that that'll stop anytime soon.
Yeah, articles for like every city. It keeps amazing me. Like they just put out one I was just looking at, which is the celebrations in the Ultra world throughout the year, like all the festivals, all the holidays, basically. They're like, there's no stone unturned by the lore team here. They're really trying to flesh out the world 100%, which like I super appreciate. I think that's really cool, and a great way just to get everything out there so that everything they build on this can be like cohesive, and they're not like making stuff up as they go later on. They've already got the structure down.
Yeah, and so far I'm really impressed, I guess is the word, that the stories, especially for the champions, even they're out of the gate champions, are more rooted in, I want to say, regular life. Like not all of them are just regular life people, but there's at least, it runs the gamut between some people that are crazy hero types that you'd see in like a blockbuster movie, but some of them, like we saw in Axiom, they're just like regular people who are just like, yeah, I'm going to work, and then something that like happens to them that has the classic call to action where they're like, well, now my life is uprooted, I have no other choices, I guess it's time to do something different, and this is what I decide to do. Which I really like. It's not just everyone's a crazy hero with crazy powers and they're the chosen one. It's just it feels more what's the word, relatable, because the characters are people that just go through hard times, and those hard times temper them into a hero eventually.
It's a nice variety, and I have so far found myself attaching to particular stories than others, which is good. I mean, there should be some amount of resonation that you have that is, greater or lesser, just depending on your own personal experiences as well. Before we get into talking about our Bravo stories, I think one little bit of news that we have to mention is, and there's a sad note to this and a happy note to this, but Gen Con's events went live. Unfortunately, Jordan has learned that he's going to be unable to make it to Gen Con.
It is
So
unfortunate.
yeah, so
I'm
yep,
really
so
sad about
so I'll still be there, but Jordan will not. In case we got the Jordan fans out there who've been excited to meet him, you're going to have to wait for another event, unfortunately. However, the events went live, and holy cow, Jordan! I don't know if you've
it
taken a
sold
look at
out like
this.
almost immediately. Like
Yeah,
the only things available were like the learn to play.
there are still spots as we're recording this in the faction events. So like the starter deck tournaments. And there are still some learn to plays available, but a lot of learn to plays have sold out, and the drafts were gone very quickly. Probably within, I'm trying to think of, I did get into mine somehow, even though I had like a high spot in line or a low, whatever. I was deep in the line. So it took me a little while. It was like 7,000 when the events went live. It took me a long time. Yeah, I don't know. I was there at the second it started and I pressed enter, but it just threw me in the back of the line. And when I got up to the way Gen Con's event registration works is you wish list everything you want. And then when it goes live, you just try and get in line to be able to check out and get everything that's still available on your wish list. So this is actually really wild. We were on my wife and I were driving. We're on a road trip to your hometown, Jordan, actually to the Minneapolis area. Surprise, we were there for a day. We didn't tell you. We had to go to IKEA, so it happens sometimes. So we were on this trip, and I had entered the queue before we left, and handed the phone to my wife, and we're like, okay, just when the queue pops, we just got to check out, nice and easy. And Gen Con's website is not very clear about what to press and how to do this, and the tensions get high and everything. So we ended up, we got in line, we got to the end of the line. My wish list said all my tickets were bought, were in the cart, and I was like, oh, great, that's good. But it actually had said one event was sold out, but it still said I had the ticket. And I was like, that's interesting. Like I thought maybe I must have gotten like the last ticket or something for one of the altered drafts. And then she goes to check out, but the buttons, seriously, like they say things and they don't make sense. And the checkout is like way at the bottom of the screen, like slightly covered up by the footer on the website. So it's like really not clear where it is, and ends up misclicking on a button that tried to throw my wish list back in. It succeeded, even though I had nothing left on the wish list. But either way, it put me to the end of the line again.
No.
And yeah, I know. Yeah, it was scary. And so I was like 8,000 in line again at that point, and there was no way to get your wish list out, and you can't check out while your wish list is processing. So we just had to wait and wait and wait, and it went fairly fast that time. The good news is that apparently it saves your cart through that process. So it didn't, I was afraid it would be like, oh, it's been 5-10 minutes. Like a lot of, like, you go buy movie tickets or whatever, it'll be like, you have 5 minutes, you better hurry, right? Or plane tickets, often very similar. In this case, it did keep all the tickets in the cart. We got to the end. I like pulled over. I'm like, let's just look at this together so that we can make sure we find the right button. And we're like looking around, like, here it is. It's covered by the footer. Like, who would see this thing right now? I don't know if it was the mobile layout or whatever, but like, oh my God, it was frightening. But we got it checked out. It was all good. I had all the tickets. I triple checked everything. I'm like, let me see my schedule. Yep, there they are. Let me see my tickets. There they are. Let me see my purchase history. There they are. Okay, so I ended up getting in. I will be playing in 2 booster drafts in a faction tournament. And I know some of you are like, Dan, why aren't you playing in everything? I have other games and I have other obligations, and I'm hoping to get to hang out with the team and maybe do another interview thing or something like that. So got a lot of things to do that weekend, but I was very ecstatic to get into those booster drafts and the faction tournament, and several other people from the main deck crew who aren't Jordan are going to be in faction tournaments and drafts that weekend too. So yeah, that'll be a ton of fun. I'm really looking forward to that. And Jordan, you are going to be at a different event actually for a different card game, and we're going to wish you well. Although here on Fleeting Thoughts, Jordan, we all know that you would have pulled the greatest unique of all time if you came to Gen Con. I just have to throw that out there.
God, don't I know it? That's my luck.
So let me know down in the comments, everyone, if you are going to be at Gen Con, if you got into the events you wanted to, or if luck wasn't on your side, you missed out. These are retail boosters, so it's not like, I guess maybe that's the silver lining for you, Jordan, and for anyone who missed out. It's like at least they weren't like the Kickstarter boosters, which would have been like fire
I thought
draft.
they were going to be Kickstarter boosters. I didn't
No.
know they were retail boosters.
Yep. Jordan just got excited because he's missing Gen Con now. He's not missing out on. No, but I mean,
plenty of Kickstarter product. I don't need any more.
Yeah, no, that's right. You got plenty. I'm just pumped to draft. Draft was so fun. The time I got to do the fake draft with all these fake. Oh, that's a Dragon Ball Z card. These fake cards. I have so many cards off to the side. I'm excited to do with real cards, and I'm really hopeful that we get to see just some cool, whether I get them or other people. I want to see cool, unique cards.
I know. I'm going to be patrolling the sites to see what kind of stuff gets pulled in real time, and eventually, when Dan gets crowned the booster draft champion, it'll be sick.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I got pretty destroyed. No, I didn't get destroyed. Sorry. When I did that draft in Paris, there were like 3 people who were like playtesters who clearly were like drafting super good decks, and then there were a couple of us dorks who like didn't know what we were doing. But I did win games with my weird Izmir Lyra Muna deck that I had a card that's been spoiled now that we can finally talk about in that deck. It was it's an Izmir card called it's called like small steps, big steps. Hang on. What's this thing called again? It was small step giant leap. Maybe I think that's what it's called. That would make sense, right? That would be a logical name for the card, like the moon landing. Does that track? Am I remembering that right? Yeah, here we go. Small step, giant leap. This is finally been spoiled now, so I can actually hold this up on the camera. But it's an Izmir card that costs 6, and it allows you to simply progress on the expedition track. It is fleeting as well. But as we know, there are tricks. There are ways to get it back, to not have it have fleeting. When I saw that card, I was really excited. It's like, here's a way. I don't have to win anything. You can put all the dragons down. You can fill your board with Ortis nonsense, and I'll just go. Actually, I just win right now by progressing in the middle of the turn, not at dusk. Which
means there's a chance that you can also progress at the end of the turn if you happen to already have a lead.
Yeah. Yep. That's
like if
true.
If you're doing draft and you have a bunch of Muna nonsense that is anchored, and your pre-turn anchored stuff wins you a side, then you can use that on this turn and win twice. That'd be sick.
Yep. It's cool. It's a cool card. So, if you in draft, very fun. All the combinations you can do. Anyway, okay. One more thing. So, because I think we're about to move on to our Bravos lore discussion, and Jordan's going to really take the reins here. I had to get out my talking because Jordan's going to be doing several of the stories. So get my talking out of the way. If you enjoy what we do here in Fleeting Thoughts and you want to support us in Main Deck, remember there are a couple of ways you can do that. Number 1, liking the video, engaging with the podcast, 5-star reviews, commenting down below, all that stuff. Greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for doing that. And then the second thing you can do is if you play any other TCGs and you like to buy cards for them from tcgplayer.com, which is a great place to buy your single cards, you can always use our affiliate link down below, or go to bit.ly/shoptcgs. That's bit.ly/shoptcgs. You go down, use that link instead of going to the TCG Player homepage, and you will support us when you first. We get a little kickback from whatever you buy. So thank you so much for all of your support in all the ways that you support Main Deck. Now, Jordan, let's let you be the champion. Let's see you lead the way with your bravery and your honor. Show us the Bravos way here. Let's talk about who are the Bravos.
Yes, so the Bravos are a glorious faction in this wonderful world. Their main traits are, as Dan said, they're very brave. They like getting out. They're doers, not. I mean, it doesn't mean they're dumb or anything when I say this. They're not thinkers. They're doers. Again, not that they're dumb, but they just prefer to do things with action. They like to show their bravado, their feelings by acting them instead of talking about them or planning them out. They kind of just feel it out and go with the flow. And they're very bombastic in their activities. They're natural athletes due to the fact that they're generally doers. They're always on the move and they have high aspirations and they like to achieve those aspirations, getting out in the world and doing all that stuff. Some of the finer points. One of their unique features is actually their alteration style. As we talked with Axiom, their alteration style was more about using, making devices and imbuing their alteration abilities into objects to have them there. The alteration style of Bravos is, if I pronounce this correctly, the Avgren, with two N's at the end. So I'm not sure if that's
That's
enunciated
probably
correctly.
right.
Um,
I guess probably.
Yeah, so the Avgron style is very different from the Axiom style, as you'd imagine. Instead of doing something specific, they just kind of shape the world or themselves reactively, I want to say. Something kind of like more just bolstering themselves and doing minor things with the world around them. For example, a master alterationist using Avgrun, that's a sailor, for example, could do some minor alterations to the ocean waters around them to make it easier for travel. One of the great examples, one of the stories we'll get to, is there's this group called the Alt Runners, which are like a free running, competitive free runners, essentially. And they use alterations to kind of shape the world to make like bars appear out of the wall that they can grab and swing onto and do different stuff like that. They can cause themselves to jump higher, do more acrobatic flourishes by enhancing their normal physique using alteration, things like that.
I wanted to just interrupt really quick on that because when I was reading the articles, I found this one of the most curious and interesting parts about Bravos. Just thinking from the idea that each faction has to have this alteration style that sort of embodies who they are, and it got me thinking like, why is it that the alteration style of Bravos is to absorb assimilate ideas around them, emotions around them into themselves. Because like I guess the way I was reading it too, right? I was like that's almost a very like I don't mean this negatively, but it's like a selfish sort of alteration style where it's like it feels like it's very much you are just going to take in everything around you and empower you with that. But then it sort of like radiates outward from them. And I don't know, Jordan, did you have any thoughts on kind of like how you take the alteration style that they've given the Bravos to reflect on like their personalities?
Kinda. So I guess maybe not specifically on that, but one thing that I thought of when I first read that is it felt to me to kind of like do a parallel to something else. Is it felt a lot kind of like auras in other media. So like a paladin in some games or like a dark knight will have auras that just kind of reflect their ideologies on the world around them to kind of help shape it and empower themselves.
Well, they
And
actually
depending
they use
on
that word on the in this here too. They in fact say that this their dedication and their discipline is accompanied by a phenomenon that gives the faction members of the faction an almost demiurgic aura, akin to what could be passive alterations. The idea is the more they improve in their preferred skills, the more strength they draw from the ideas around them,
yeah.
which then empowers them and then sort of radiates out into their actions and everything. I guess like I think the way I thought about it was it's really like everything the Bravos do is sort of about their own story, their own achievements, their own power. It's very much and I think that comes across personally. I think that comes across in a very positive light. It's a very like self-empowering faction. It's where you're like, I have the if I dedicate my time, I have the power to achieve whatever I can. Where I think we'll look at some other factions later. I assume like Muna, for example, is going to feel a little different. It's going to be a lot more about like communal empowerment. Where this is really just like the strength of the individual, not in a negative sense, but in the sense that, yeah, I mean, like kind of like an aura, the power of a true hero is going to he or she is going to pave the way themselves for whatever they're trying to achieve, and others may also benefit from that way being paved. As the Bravos, I think, are naturally talking about this too. They're natural leaders for things as well.
Yep. And one thing that that really reflected on me when I was reading it is it almost sounded like versus the Axiom or some of the other factions that it's not something that they particularly like work at or do specifically. It's almost like most of the Avgrun style is just a passive like natural enhancement. Like they're not like, I guess that's kind of my way of saying that's why I personally don't take it as like selfish, because they're not specifically doing the alteration. The alteration is just kind of emanating from themselves, from their passion of focusing on their craft.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a passive ability rather than something that they actively are trying to like harness. It just happens as a natural occurrence of their passion, kind of deal.
And that really, you said something which maybe is a line we'll refer to a few times here, but they're doers and not thinkers. Again, in the way that they just want action rather than to sit around and discuss something for a long time. And that really is like that same concept. It's like they're not going to plot out, how to apply an alteration to something. It's very impulsive. It's very intuitive. Just say like instead of like coming up with some massive scheme, they're just going to reach out and touch something, and what they need to happen is going to happen. I think that's cool. It's going to be really fun, I think, as we go through the series too, to talk about how each of these different factions has that different alteration style and how they've crafted a style that fits the personalities of each faction.
Very much so. I'm also a big fan of that. I like, so far anyway, I mean, we have 4 other ones to go through, but so far the 2 that we've read seem very distinct to the faction itself, and I don't doubt that the rest are going to be like that. It's really cool to have similar, because it's the same base ability, but they manifest very differently in the factions, which is cool.
Yeah. So what else you got for us here? The basics of the Bravos.
Yeah, the basics of the Bravos, of course, they thrive on competition, as you'd imagine from, natural athletes and things like that. They don't have a lot of burden for ceremony, but they do like testing their mettle against each other. I believe they have a couple of different things. One we'll hear about in one of the stories is the Omnium, which is, it basically sounded like an Olympic style event that is held, and different factions will compete in various things such as the alt runners, or I think there's a what's the word? There's a Coliseum where you battle it out as well in like actual combat, things like that. They also have what's called the Parliament of Ashes, which seems to be a body of government that hasn't really done much for a long time, and the venue that they generally meet in has now been used for various things such as prominent duels, and almost seemed like it was more just like a tourist attraction now because they don't do anything with it. So people come to get inspiration by seeing the grand halls and the decoration, which is similar to like a cathedral that we'd have in our world, where there's artwork and statues adorning the sides of their heroes, and they have the big murals and like etching and sculptures on the ceilings and stuff like that. So if you can imagine something like a Sistine Chapel style sculpture embedded in the rockwork of things.
They also, it's called the Parliament of Ashes, and that's, from what I understand here, for 2 different reasons. Number one, they literally have the ashes of their deceased heroes and commanders and leaders within this area. So it sounds like Bravos members will pay respects and ask for blessings and everything from the heroes of their past, the ones that they've looked up to, and the ones who have already achieved great things. But additionally, and I'm excited to talk about this a little bit. I don't want to necessarily steal the thunder on it, but the little plot line that I found the most enticing. There's a phoenix egg in the middle of the Parliament of Ashes that has been dormant for like forever, for a super long time. But
burning constantly for ages.
Right. And ashes, phoenix, those all go together as well. So I thought it's cute that it kind of has those two meanings. We'll talk about, I'm sure, the phoenix in a little bit. But yeah, sorry, go ahead, Jordan, keep going.
Oh, no problem at all. But and then one of the other major features here is what they've been listing in the section of current objectives. So as the faction as a whole, the things that they're kind of striving for in this world, their two main objectives is what's called Kuninga's Quest, if I pronounce that correctly. And their biggest legend, their biggest leader of legend, his name is Rune. He's the first king of Asgartha. And he disappeared some time ago into the tumult. And there's a legend that states that if whoever is the chosen champion should be able to venture into the tumult and find Rune and become Rune's new ascended champion, and essentially reign over the Bravos as their king, is from what I understand, or not necessarily king, but like a kingly like figure. They will become a legendary champion for Bravos as a whole. Some believe this. Of course, most of the young children, as they grow up and become teenagers, that's what really compels them. They're like, yeah, I gotta find this. It's gonna be me. I can tell it. And some of the others wave it away and they're like, that's just a nonsense story for children. Like that has nothing to do with anything. You're wasting your time. But one of their objectives is still, whether or not the legends are true, to eventually find what happened to their legendary hero Rune.
Rune also was. I mean, this just ties everything together. But Rune became the Kuninga became their king when the phoenix landed on his shoulder and effectively like granted him the blessing. And so this is tied directly to the phoenix egg that they keep in the Parliament of Ashes, because the legend says that when Rune is found, then the phoenix also will be reborn, and theoretically then could land on the shoulder of the new champion or whatever, the new Kuninga. So that's I love that plot line, because it's the kind of thing where, to me, like, clearly, Jordan, there's going to be like a set in the future of Altered that's like called The Phoenix Reborn or something, and they can have this whole plot line, this whole story, like an entire set just based on the Bravos Kuninga being claimed again, Rune being found, or maybe Rune's dead, or like who knows what's going on. But they have this set. It's just the setup that's there. TCGs are supposed to be long lasting things, right? And they really have laid this groundwork for a lot of intriguing and interesting stories into the future, and this is a great example of that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to see when that set comes out. And there's also the chance that, what if the tumult has changed Rune and the new champion has to rise up to fight against Rune in some way?
Yeah.
So
exactly, that'd be cool too. That'd be sick.
It'll be very exciting when that time comes. But yeah, so that's one of their main primary objectives as a faction. Their next one is the Leviathan hunt. Leviathans are these gigantic, I don't know if they're considered eidolons, but they're creatures of tumult nonetheless that roam the land, sea, and sky. A couple of them that we already know about was just Kaibara, which is a peaceful, benevolent one. It's nice. They obviously aren't hunting that, but there are plenty of other Leviathans that are not quite so nice or peaceful. One of them you'll hear about later on. They're pretty ravenous and destructive when they want to be. So the Bravos take it upon themselves to journey out among the shifting islands and kind of figure out where they're at and battle these gargantuan creatures. Sometimes they are able to do it. Sometimes they can just route the Leviathan back to the tumult and save whatever they can. And sometimes they succeed completely. Just kind of depends. They also, with this, they tend to embark with Muna alterers as well to kind of combine their forces to take advice from them.
No, no,
They
no. They embark against the advice of the Muna. Actually, the Muna don't
Oh,
want
it's
to do that.
against. Sorry, I thought they conferred with them. That's right. They're at
No,
odds with
the
Muna because
Muna
Muna are like, just leave them.
Muna are very against this idea because they're a part of the natural balance of everything.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You are correct.
That's okay. I
They are.
got you. We get each other's back here. That's the point.
But yeah, so that is the second objective: is the Great Leviathan hunts.
Yeah, and yeah, like you said, those are one of the stories is very directly about that idea, as well as one of the stories focuses on the Kuninga's quest as well. So I mean, it's cool. It's cool how this setup they have the setup, and then the heroes kind of tie into all of them as well.
For sure, for sure. So, did you have anything to add about Bravos in general before we dive into our first champion?
No, I mean, well, yeah, I guess I'm just going to mention really quick. I just feel like this is maybe a useful thing to mention, but um, we talked a lot in the Axiom podcast about how there are the different guilds, and like there's sort of this big structure, and there's like a doctorate program for the Axiom, basically, and all that kind of stuff.
Thank
Um,
you. I forgot about this part. I was gonna go over it, and then I omitted it from my notes because I was like, I can't. I'll remember that, but I will let you continue.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just like it's worth discussing that the Bravos do have sort of they have a hierarchy, and they have I guess it's not quite divided into a bunch of guilds necessarily, but they have companies instead. And the companies they're similar. They dedicate to different like areas of expertise. And they name a few like personal protection, firefighting, and artistic endeavors. So it's not just like doing like the sort of the physical labor stuff, but they will just dedicate towards various things like that, as well as like expeditions and things like that. So the beyond that, there's like a personal growth opportunity, I guess, where they'll have people who enter um, into the Bravos, and then they will like they'll play their part, they'll do their stuff for their company. Um, they'll eventually sort of become a veteran after having done a lot of demonstrating their skills well enough, and then they take aspirants under their wings who act as squires. So really, you have this sort of like knight and squire relationship happening where the Bravos will take younger Bravos under their wings and then train them up to then take new younger Bravos under their wings in their companies. And eventually, when a Bravos really proves themselves well enough, they will actually get to be sort of no, elected isn't the right word necessarily, but they'll be granted the honor of being able to sit on the Parliament of Ashes. But the Parliament of Ashes, the actual organization of people, they don't really meet anymore. They haven't had to meet in many, many years, which just kind of is an interesting show of like the Bravos individuality at play, where they have this structure where they can meet and decide things among all the greatest, most revered champions of the Bravos can meet to make decisions, but they, for whatever reason, don't need to anymore. It's been a long time since they've needed to do that, but that's kind of the general structure that you'll hear in some of these stories too of the Bravos. It's really this focus on like veterancy, and then just joining different companies to kind of use your skills to the best of their ability.
Very much so. But yeah.
Okay, so with that stuff out of the way, Jordan, then why don't we, if you're cool with it, let's talk about our three heroes in the Bravos faction and just go through their stories.
Sounds like a fantastic plan. We can start off. The different hero sets we'll be talking about, if people who are not knowing of the cards that have been spoiled, is going to be Kojo and Booda. There will also be Atsadi and Surge. And the last one is
Basira and Kaizaimon.
Yes, I'm glad you said that because I was looking at the word and like I need to pronounce it correctly because
Your
some of
brain
them are
broke
difficult.
suddenly.
Yeah, I was like, ah. But yeah, so we'll just jump into Buddha and then we'll pitch to you. And you can do Asmati and then we'll end with Astadi or
I'll
Atsadi.
you could totally
Atsadi.
do this. Yeah, you do Kojo Booda. I'll do Basira and Kaizaimon, and then you do Atsadi Surge.
All right, perfect. So starting off with what some would consider the poster child of Altered, was one of the first key arts and on a lot of the promotional material, along with the faux pack art that they had at first. He was on the box. Is Kojo and Buddha. So Kojo, when he was born, was described as being a daredevil. His parents would often say he's a Keelon battery, buzzing with energy, constantly running around, doing somersaults, getting into trouble. Doing what you'd expect as a high energy child. His parents, mother is Tehia, if I pronounce that correctly. She was a woodworker who focused on luxury marquetry, which if I know correctly, is like a type of woodworking where you like layer different types of wood together to create the pattern using only wood. So you'll put like a light wood and a dark wood together to create that, that differentiation. If that's not what it is, you can correct me in the comments. His father owned a small convenience store, and his older sister was described as being his complete opposite. She was very reserved, not super energetic all the time. She took her time to make, very thoughtful and quiet approach to everything she did. Still just as passionate. She just was a lot more reserved in her outward appearance when she did stuff. She was more, I want to say tactical, more thoughtful, and lost in her own headspace as she approached things, is what it made it sound like.
Okay, but have you said her name yet?
No, I have not said her name. Her name was Gulrang.
Right. She's another one of the heroes.
Is she?
Did you not? You didn't realize that she's one of the Ortis heroes. She's the Ortis hero that is the gives everything defender.
Oh my god, she is! I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, yeah.
In my head, since her name was in the story, I was like, she's a Bravo. So there's no Bravo.
No, she is an Ortis.
That makes a lot more sense now, based on the small description they gave of her in this bit. All right.
Yeah. We'll get to her in a couple of weeks, but yeah. I thought that was cool. It's cool to I enjoy. I mean, obviously they could design this to be however they want, but I enjoy when the stories get those little like subtle crossovers, which we've seen in there's an Axiom story last week that had some of that too, just a little bit. But yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, so good to know. So his sister is also an alterer and a guild member, just a different faction. So as he got older, he would do as children would do, hang out, do all kinds of stuff. And then once he got old enough, he started wanting to, run the streets. He liked doing moderate parkour, which then led him to want to apply to be a courier for the postal service, because it allowed him to essentially get paid to learn the streets, learn the roadways. He'd deliver mail as he jumped around, leapt all over the place, and he started getting into his climbing and parkour more so than his postal work, which led him to start speed running of sorts. He started timing himself on his postal runs. He'd want to improve. So every time he did his postal run, he'd set a different route. He'd try to find the most optimal way for him to get across the street, get across the city and make all his deliveries in turn. And one day while he was on the job, I believe it described it as he had shadows dart around over him, and it caught his eye, and he looked up and got a better vantage point, and he got on the rooftop, and that was his first experience seeing the alt runners. He loved seeing their silhouettes dancing on the streets and on the rooftops and along poles. The alt runners being a parkour, a competitive parkour group for the layman, where they would essentially run races of parkour across the city. At first, or not at first, they did it to practice doing, non-official tournaments, if you will. But their overall goal was to train for the Omnius, or it's
Omnium.
Omnium. I have it on my notes here, but it's hard to pick it out. Yeah, so they're training for the Omnium, but we'll get to that later. Right now, that just catches his eye, and he really starts thinking about it. So he sets his goal. He's like, you know what? I want to be part of that. That's me. I want to do that. So he starts training. And, time goes by where he's constantly pushing himself, training up. So he wants to be like them. So he kind of trails behind them, starts learning some of their roots. He notices they're using alteration to, make poles appear where they weren't or help them jump higher. He starts, just honing his craft at his ability to do that. And one day he finally approaches them and is like, hey, I want to join you guys. I've been trying, so hopefully you can give me a shot. And he meets up with his four friends, one of them being Gaunt. And let's see, what was the other names are eluding me. Gaunt is the main one. There's also Uju, Cathel, and Camilla. And they he meets them at this place called the Speedster's Den, where he suspects is where they hang out because he's heard a lot of rumors about the local alt runner group. That's kind of where they meet, and that's where they start their runs. So he asks, to be honest, he's like, hey, please let me try. And they say, you know what? They deliberate, and one of them is like, you know what? Just let him at least see if he can do it. And so they're like, all right, follow us. If you can keep up, then we'll let you. We'll help you out. So he ends up keeping up. He does struggle a fair bit, but they end up seeing the spark in his eye, and they're like, you know what? You're on. You're not on the team yet, but we'll help you train up. And they also assist him with giving him some new shoes and some pointers, and he starts training with them and gets better and better. Eventually, I believe if I got the hints right, he starts falling for Gaunt. If I'm reading correctly, if you
Yep.
remember. Yep.
Yeah.
So he
Yes.
does.
Yeah. He and Gaunt definitely are roommates. They seem to enter a relationship for sure.
Yeah, because they never confirmed it, but based on how they spoke about them, I was like, it seems like they're in a relationship at this point.
Yes.
So they are definitely romantically intertwined, and as the months and years go by, he's just content and very happy with his life. He loves what he's doing. He likes his postal work. He loves competing. He loves being an alt runner and just living his life with his friends and Gaunt. As time goes on, however, though, something does tug at him. His childhood dream has not been fulfilled at this point, and it's currently not on path to be fulfilled. His childhood dream, of course, like most Bravos, is he admired Rune, and he wants to be Rune's champion, and he feels it inside that he has the ability to become Rune's champion. So after, I think it said after a couple years, actually, of just hanging with Gaunt, being an competitive alt runner, competing in the different events and competing in the Omnius, he makes the decision. Along after speaking with Gaunt, they both come to the conclusion that he needs to pursue this, and Gaunt supports him completely. So they start working towards that goal. And he needs to apply to become a or not the guild member. He basically applies to the expeditionary force because he needs to go to the tumult, and they're constantly on the bleeding edge of the tumult territory, and they're out there exploring the unexplored. And if someone's going to find Rune, it's not going to be in the explored lands. So he applies. Gaunt helps pull some strings to get his application seen and get heard. They vouch for him. Him and his alt runner companions are like, hey, he's good. You guys should take him. And I believe it even says that he talks with his sister, and even though his sister is against it, she does eventually help out a little bit, if I remember correctly, to at least get him a chance to prove himself to become part of the expeditionary force. But before he leaves to pursue in his dream, after him and Gaunt have a discussion, he goes outside to get some air, and this is when Booda actually appears to him, kind of like a, if you will, signaling that he should leave, is the impression that I got. He went outside to get some air, and a rainbow small tumult singularity appears outside on the deck, and it is in the form of a cat, which is Booda. Booda then hangs out with him before he makes the decision to pursue his childhood dream, as he's alt running, and quickly is, keeping pace with everyone, being a new Eidolon, just kind of leaps, bounds, becomes a part of Kojo, as all Eidolons eventually do when they become alterers. And that's how Buddha becomes his companion.
So I think
And
just to jump in a little bit, I think Buddha actually joins him a ways before he applies to join the Rediscovery Endeavor.
yeah, it was
Um,
during that couple year period, if I'm correct. I
yeah,
have it in my notes in the wrong order for some
yeah.
reason.
So Buddha joins him and is actually like Buddha becomes the mascot of their alt run club. Actually,
Yes, that's what it
um,
was.
so they're called the Jusaka Blaze, and Buddha is the mascot. And it's after that, it's when Kojo is loving what he's doing, but just keeps feeling this anxiety within him that he's not achieving that dream, like you mentioned.
Yeah. But yeah, so after that, he eventually gets accepted in the Expeditionary Force after his trial, and he. Sorry, my brain just stopped working. But yeah, so eventually, after a long fought time with his application process, being able to apply for the Expeditionary Force and try out, he does eventually make it into the Expeditionary Force, and that leads him to where he is today. Um, he's out there.
Well,
After the following year, he goes through a musubi ceremony with Buddha, which, as we mentioned before, is where they actually connect to become one, and Buddha becomes a more permanent eidolon versus some of the other ones that have the ability to change and morph and eventually run out of energy. Now they are bonded through this ceremony. And
yeah,
during the time that he leaves,
there we
actually,
go.
during the time he leaves is around the time of the Omnium, where they had a real chance to win, and his friends during his triumph is also when they win the Omnium during that summer.
That was the part I wanted to make sure got mentioned because it's I think it's such a sweet note in this one that he works with his friends. He's such an integral part of the team, but they all support him, especially Galt, as he is trying to achieve this goal of his. And he goes to the Musubi ceremony with Buddha. He gets accepted into the Expeditionary Corps, and even amongst all of that, his team is running hard, and they manage to win the Ultron Cup as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great, and he feels the friendship that he has with them, the support that they have for each other, as he's about to embark on this journey to try and find the legendary first king who may not even exist.
Yeah, and he feels a lot very empowered by that too, because I think it says something along the lines of like, after that he rejoices with his teammates, and when he is ready to leave, he knows he's not leaving alone. He has basically that huge web of support backing him as he goes off into the unknown.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
the that's Kojo and Buddha, and I like that. I like that this story is a little more grounded. The other ones are going to be like the other ones that we go through are going to be like
they're
tragedy.
wild.
This one's more of just a sort of I don't know, a coming of age story like style thing where it's just the boy who has a dream and works hard and meets friends along the way. This is like Kojo Buddha is like the shonen anime um, of Altered. I guess
I know it even has like a mini tournament arc.
yeah, it does. It's true. It has a tournament arc. Yeah, yeah. This is great. If you're the shonen anime fan out there, then yeah, you got the Kojo Buddha story, and it's perfect. It's yeah, no, it's cool. I think you remarked before we started recording this too that it's like Buddha just kind of appears at one point where like sometimes some of the eidolons are through tragedy or through just more extreme circumstances, and this one was kind of like he just met him, one day.
It just happened to be on the deck.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. Shall I go on to Basira and Kaizaimon?
Yes.
Okay. So Basira and Kaizaimon is one of these stories full of tragedy. So Basira was a Bravos, through and through, all the way. She was in the Bravos when they mounted an expedition to reclaim a fortress, basically, a forward base that existed within the Terra Incognita called, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to pronounce the C soft or hard, but I kind of like the sound of Kabir, but it could be Sabir. I'm not positive. I'm not sure, but I'm going to go with Kabir because it sounds cooler to me. So Kabir is the name of this fortress, and Basira embarks on an expedition with her fellow Bravos. She's a soldier out there, and they're going in. They're like, okay, we need to reclaim this because it's been taken by the tumult, and obviously that's one of their goals is to explore the land and regain their territory and stabilize it, right? So Basira heads out on this expedition with the sorry, before I get there, let me pull back a sec because there's an important part I forgot. There's a reason that Basira is in the Bravos, which is when she was a child, when she was 7 years old, I believe it says, her entire town was murdered by Singula. Just like everybody just dies. Singula is one of the Leviathans, a giant flying centipede monster. And one day, it just blasted her whole town and killed her parents and killed everybody and made Basira an orphan. She obviously became very angry, bitter, rebellious. But ultimately, she was basically handed a wooden sword, when she was young. That'd be crazy to have a real sword. Handed her a wooden sword and said, well, you know what? Take out your anger on this dummy, learn sword fighting, become a Bravos warrior, and you can get your revenge on Singula. So she is a Bravos warrior fueled by this desire for revenge when she joins this expedition to retake Kabir. They go to Kabir. They get inside it. They're looking around, and the Kabir, it has a the in front of it, so I keep going the wrong. But they get to the Kabir, and they discover that inside this fortress, it's been turned to basically a mad science lab. Diagrams, cages containing bones, vials, Erlenmeyer flasks, all sorts of nonsense inside this building now that obviously the Bravos weren't doing that before. And inside one of those cages, she finds a creature. This creature is a tall red creature, tattooed body, horns jutting out everywhere, long tail, looking very malnourished even. And she locks eyes with it and then feels compassion, and she opens the door and opens the cage door and lets it out and says, "You got to get away from here." And shortly after that happens, the Citadel is attacked by a monster. Sounds like a very we use chimera in Altered to refer to these creatures that can change forms, but it's attacked by what sounds like a mythological chimera. So a monster with a lion's head, bat wings, scorpion tail. This thing attacks and just starts destroying the Bravos, spitting streams of acid, venom, flame, just everything is coming at them, and the Bravos are dying. And Basira and the rest of the Bravos retreat. They get as far as they can. They got to get to the boats that they came to this fortress on. And as she gets to the boats, they take the boats, they get out in the water, and they're continue to be chased by these monsters. It's not just the big chimera-like monster, but multiple monsters. And they slash through the ships, and they start destroying them, taking them down. And Basira falls into the water and loses her consciousness. She wakes up on the shore and feeling enveloped by a warm presence that has prevented her body from freezing and potentially even helped her get to shore. She realizes that the chimera that she had freed from the cage had turned into a tattoo and morphed onto her body, emitted waves of heat, kept her warm in the water, melted snow and ice on the land where she washed up, and has effectively saved her and kept her alive. So sort of she saved him and he saved her in return. Basira just had to hold on for days, lost, until an Ortis airship arrived, found her, rescued her. And after that, I mean, this poor girl, she was traumatized as a kid by Singula just killing her family and destroying her whole town. And now she's traumatized by this loss of effectively the rest of the expedition to retake the Kabir, where she feels guilt, she feels responsibility. Why was there more she could have done to fend off the monsters, to save her comrades? Why was it just her? Why her? Why was she the only one that survived that? So she felt terrible about that, and she felt that fate was against her. Everything's going wrong. The world resents her, and she leaves the capital city where she was, and she tried to just kind of, exist, live they say here, they call it a quasi-solitary existence. She tries to help where she can, but basically lives a low-key life, just feeling kind of rough about everything. But Kaizaimon, which is what she had named the chimera, stayed with her the whole time. She never understood why Kaizaimon stayed with her. She felt like his debt was repaid plenty of times over, but she was grateful for him. She then, as she started to, time healing wounds a little bit, she started a family. She met a Muna named Filiki, who was her complete opposite in every way. She had kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. And over the years, her emotions subsided. She started to feel comfortable. She was at this point a wise and veteran, able to help younger Muna. But it was at this point, then years later, that the capital called on her again and said, look, I know you've been through a lot, but you are a veteran and you were the only remaining person from our last expedition to retake the Kabir. And we need your help for the rediscovery endeavor. She considers it and is unsure basically if she's going to join, but she feels like she owes it. She feels like she has a unique place here, and she accepts the offer to help. But she, of course, still feels unsettled from everything she has to confront again. Kaizaimon proves helpful. As they're preparing, she devotes herself to training the recruits who are joining the Expeditionary Corps to join the rediscovery endeavor. And her, and especially Kaizaimon, who is a very imposing presence, and like just tall, demon-like creature, motivates the troops, shows them, what they're going to be expected to be facing in the tumult, and she helps train everyone. Shortly before she leaves, her husband Filiki dies. It doesn't actually even say why, but I assume just some natural cause of some kind. Her children at this point are parents. Basira is not a young buck like Kojo. She's at this point an old, wizened veteran who is needed for her, specifically for her experience and her wisdom, and her strength, of course, too. And with Filiki gone and her kids settled on her own, she has nothing holding her back at this point. So she has her axe to grind. She still wants Singula to pay for all those years ago, and she wants the monsters who had destroyed her previous compatriots to get vengeance upon them as well. And she wants to honor the fallen, redeem her mistakes, and support the Bravos in retaking their fortresses. So she joins the rediscovery effort and heads out again, hopefully this time to see more success. That's the story.
Nice. Very good story. I'm a fan of it. I like how it turns into a tattoo to like protect her, so it can like shift between its physical form and like a merged form.
Yeah, it's a cool idea, and this is more of a darker story, like I mentioned right away, than Kojo and Booda's. One thing I think is cool here too is a lot of just IPs, narrative endeavors in general will really focus their main characters on younger people. And I appreciate here that Basira is she has a mentorship role, but she's not in this story as the Obi-Wan Kenobi, as the wizened character who is going to lead everyone and die or whatever.
I like just how that's the end cap, or like the start of her journey as we see it. We get to see how she came to be where she's at now in the current story.
Yeah, it's just she's a character who has a longer history, which I think just like builds that anticipation for what she can accomplish here, rather than her just being like, well, those days are behind me, like a mentor figure would be. It's like, no, those days are ahead of me. And it's been many years, and I have a huge axe to grind right now. I think that's really cool.
It's a very good story. I like it a lot. I also like the character. It's going to be exciting to play.
Yeah, the character, which we had pictured here, if you're watching the video version, I think is very good. I got destroyed by it once, in person, in fact, and yeah, it's spooky. It's a spooky deck, and I definitely think people are going to see success with it too. Last one, I think this story is wild. This story is really cool.
The Bravos is definitely like the wholesome, the tragic, and the wild, and this is going to be the wild one.
Yep. So Atsadi and Surge, Jordan, let's hear it.
Yeah, this one was also probably the most cinematic. So what happens actually in the beginning of this one? It starts with like the current day, and then it flashes back to kind of like lead up to how it got here. It starts off with Atsadi in a duel. We're currently in the Colosseum that we spoke about before, dueling what they described as a Hadarite fencer, which I looked briefly and I couldn't see any other references for what a Hadarite is.
I'm sure we'll get a whole lore story on him at some point for sure.
Yeah, so you can definitely read it. I'm not going to go over the points, but it does a very good job of describing the exact movements. It starts off with his steps crunch on the sand as he circles. The blade raises around another duelist, and it does a very good job of explaining the like back and forth of this duel. But for the lore purposes, just know that it starts off with like, think of a cinematic opening to a movie where it's zoned into the character's monologue as they're doing a slow motion fight scene, and then it jumps back to be like, but how did I get to this point in my life to lead me here? So during this, it also mentions that basically talks about Atsadi's. I'm going to be really bad about it pronouncing that.
You can do it. I believe in you.
Atsadi, about Atsadi's prowess in combat. Very, very skilled blade master. Kind of running circles around this fencer. But it's not enough. is what it says. For Atsadi, he has a bunch. He's one-armed swordsman, of course. He's currently well known, but he's not at his goal. We'll go over what his goal is later, but it specifically just wants to mention the prowess and some of the opponents that Atsadi has felled in the past already.
I love this list. This is so.
Yeah,
this is altered at its best, in my opinion. This is like oh, you go for it. Go for it. This is so sweet.
Atsadi has already challenged and bested some of the best fighters in both known and unknown history, and by unknown I mean fictional. So it lists some of
real
them,
and mythological.
Tome Gozen, Achilles, Sun Wukong, even managed Hua Mulan and Genrich von Brach.
Gerrit von Brach.
Yeah, it specifically brought him to his knees. And the only people that have ever managed to disarm him are Hua Mulan.
No. None other than him.
Oh, never mind. None other than him. I thought
has managed to disarm Hua Mulan.
Yeah, I thought it was the other way around. That like only Hua Mulan has been able to do. Okay,
so the list of opponents he has bested includes Tomo Gozen, Achilles, Sun Wukong, Hua Mulan, and Gerrit von Brach. Some of the most well-known, real and mythological. I think some of these are in between some of those, but like characters from history who are known to be the greatest fighters of their respective cultures.
Yeah, they're either real cultural phenomena or they're ones that are based off of a real person with some embellishments.
Right.
But then after it goes
like
after
Sun
that
Wukong.
list, like Sun Wukong,
the real character.
Well, isn't Sun Wukong though based off of an actual figure in history? It's just an embellishment.
Okay, if so, that's way deeper than my knowledge of Journey to the West. But I'm
not super versed on it, but I always was told that Journey to the West was like it was loosely based off of a real figure, and then the writer just made it like cranked it up to like 12 out of
made him
5.
into a monkey.
Yeah.
That's real loose if so, but you know what, Jordan? The cool thing is when I get the Sun Wukong card, I will scan it and read the lore.
Yeah, I'm excited about stuff like that. But so then after that, it snaps back from the middle of that duel into the past, where it describes where Atsadi grew up, and Dusk was always I believe the place is called Dusk. It is a city suspended in a collection of floating islands. Most of the city, however, is built into the underside of the islands and not on top of it. So it's always bathed in a twilight. People, I think he describes it as a troglodyte city suspended amongst the rocks, which is a very interesting thing to think about. And of course, being a hard to get to place, airship traffic is fairly high. They try to go through the crazy winds that are caused from the ocean below and the rocks above, kind of having those weird, vents of wind that billow through, kicks up dust all the time. Doesn't seem like a great place to be. It essentially paints it as just kind of like almost like an Underdark floating in the air. But one thing that Atsadi loves to do, raises goats, and the goats need to graze, and obviously on an underside of a rocky infrastructure, not a lot to graze, so he makes a pilgrimage to the top of these islands where there is grass and, funny enough, sunlight. Every day he shepherds his goats up there, battling against the winds, making sure the goats are safe as they go up. Describes it as kind of treacherous as you climb along the outside of the path to get to the top. Not a lot of people even like going up there because it's so difficult, but he does it and he enjoys it because he has his goats, and also because at the top he has his beloved, which is a very strange one. So it describes the top of it where they graze, where they can see the sun and the azure sky. And he also likes to meet with Aurora, who was described as the daughter of Hyperion and the sister of the sun and moon, which is it's like a goddess, but she creates an eidolon in the image of closely related to the age that Atsadi is. So as he has grown up, the eidolon has also grown up with him.
Yeah, this is like he's sitting in the sunlight with his goats, the same spot every day, and eventually just feels that from the warmth he feels, he just like calls out, and Aurora manifests.
Manifests, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she manifests every day. He literally can't wait until dawn so he can make the trek up there. And he spends his days with his goats and this eidolon image of this goddess from the sun. And one sec, my brain just stopped working again. Yep. So as they're, living their life, living their best life, one of these days they're kind of just chilling on a boat, having a little date, if you will, on this lake, laying in the boat, talking to each other, kissing, and he sees a rainbow shimmer. And as most of you probably know from some of these, that's not the greatest thing. The
You don't
rainbow
want
shimmer,
anything in the world to act weird in Altered. It's very bad.
so he kind of like gets up real quick to see what the shimmer is, and to his horror, the shimmer starts encasing the entire boat with him and Aurora in it into this quartz cocoon, is what it's described as. And they are unable to break out of it. He tries to, break it open. They start panicking until he grabs hold of her and starts, trying to urge her, like, hey, we need to move. And his arm gets hit with the searing pain of what appears to be 1,000 blades, like blasting his arm. And his arm is no longer there. As you guys know, the tumult, very not friendly to organic matter. So the tumult touches his arm. His entire arm is basically disintegrated from what it seems. It doesn't get super graphic, but it sounds like his arm just gets disintegrated and the pain causes him to pass out. Hearing the screams of Aurora and himself, he just passes out. And when he comes to, he, doesn't have an arm. And he immediately, first thing in his head is like, I got to get to Aurora. I got to make sure she's okay, see what's going on. And I think it describes him as he like gets out of the bed and literally crawls back to the location from where he was at. He was in his bed. He's crawling back. He eventually does make it back. I think he has some time to recover first because he, is in no condition to make that trek up there. But the second he was well enough, he makes the trek back to that lake. And to his horror, the crystallized quartz, around the boat is still sitting there in the lake. He tries to break it open with weapons and, any object he could find. He's unable to even crack it. During this process, his eidolon, which let me scroll to it real quick. I believe while he's trying to break the crystal, a spark sparks off the quartz cocoon and materializes into Surge, an eidolon, which the water envelops. Yeah, sorry, one sec. Okay, yes, I am correct. So once he fully regained his senses, he went up to see what's happening with Aurora and tried to break the cocoon. A spark emerged as an eidolon, which is Surge. I'm sure there'll be a nice picture of Surge here. And to his dismay, he couldn't find anything to breach it, and he's a little distraught. However, the newly born Chimera by his side does whisper to him that, like, hey, I've heard of this sword that can break through mountain peaks and cleave waters by the sea. Only something like this could crack this crystal jail. You should look for it. So him and Surge then start a journey to find Excalibur, which is this blade of myth and legend that Surge let him know about. So he starts going through the land, trying as, he really wants to know where it is. He spoke with the Lady of the Lake, is supposed to be the guardian of this sword. So now he's in search of the Lady of the Lake to find more information about this sword. He asks Lyrian travelers, and he hears tales. So along his path, he eventually just starts being like, all right, if I'm going to find this epic sword wielder, I need to become an epic swordsman. And this starts him on his path to become the greatest swordsman ever known, to eventually challenge this Lady of the Lake to gain ownership of Excalibur.
The lady tells him, I've kept control of the sword for generations. I am the keeper of it. It is my purpose to make sure this goes into only the hands of the greatest swordsman of all time, which is a pretty high bar. If anyone ever tells you, no, I won't let you do this unless you are literally the greatest of all time doing this, like, how do you prove that? How do you possibly prove you are going to be? It's not just the greatest right now. You have to be the greatest of all time. And she's set that bar high. So thus begins the training arc.
Yep. So he starts training. He talks to any fencer or any knowledgeable swordsman that he knows. In addition to honing his own style, he learns basically any style of swordsmanship he can get his hands on. And then after following, a fair amount of teachings that he ends up leaving Dusk to travel the world as he sought the tutelage of numerous swordsmen and blacksmith. He's begged for lessons all over the place, and that's what led him here, where now he basically accepts and challenges any swordsman he sees or meets or hears about that may be able to, help him surpass that barrier to become the best. And it zips right on back into the moment that we left in the beginning, right in the middle of his duel with this fencer. He does end up knocking them off balance and gets the better of the fencer and wins this duel. But as it states, it's not enough. He's not the best yet. There's still more. And it specifically name drops what are called, like an illustrious fighting group called the Seven Blades. And their names have been long forgotten, but they're basically like the seven, from what I can tell from this little blurb, they're like the seven best swordsmen in all of existence. And he's trying to find who their identity is because he doesn't know exactly who they are. They're like myths and legend. So he's on a journey now to identify who they are and unearth their location so he can challenge them, beat them, and prove that he is the best swordsman in all of existence.
Importantly, the Seven Blades were the protectors. They're said to be the protectors of one of the lost tribes. That's another one of those long game lore bits that we have for this, where the long ago there were a bunch of these nomadic tribes that were attempting to settle the region, and a lot of those settled together in Asgartha, but some of the nomadic tribes were lost and are out possibly in the Terra Incognita somewhere. And allegedly, one of these lost tribes has 7 really strong fighters, and he's like, "Well, I'm gonna beat them. I have to go beat them," and that's because that's the only way to get this lady to give me the sword, so that I can break my figment of a goddess who might be dead at this point out of the glass that she's encased in.
Yeah.
Which is just wild. Just a wild story.
Yeah, it's crazy. I love it. I love these stories so much. They're very entertaining to read through.
Yeah, I don't know what to add about that one.
Yeah, I am excited because the hint drop of the Seven Blades, there's going to be a set later that's called Seven Blades, and there's going to be a sick deck about these 7 swordsmen, and it's going to be dope. I just know it's going to be so sick.
There's so much possibility to build sets and cards and stuff off of everything that they've developed here. Really did enjoy. I enjoyed this was the very bombastic story. I feel like, like we talked earlier, you mentioned that word referring to Bravos there. They may be bombastic or flamboyant or something, really excessive sometimes, because being a Bravos is about being the strongest and the greatest, being the bravest, being the fastest. And the other 2 stories we had, well, I guess Koja Booda was about being the best in some way. It's being about the best alt runner. And being, and then he eventually became about chasing his dream, leaving that behind, but supporting his team. And the Basira story was a little less about being the best, but more about, I think more about striving, more about never giving up. Yep. Atsadi and Surge is 100% about, I am going to be the greatest, period. That is literally the goal. And yeah, it's cool too. We're seeing slightly different facets of the different Bravos members as well, which it's awesome. Very cool. Very cool.
Yes. So with that, then we could probably transition to an epic viewer question.
Yes. So yeah, we do have one. We're going to be answering a few of these. We have a number of our mailbag questions for some of our lore episodes here. We have we definitely want to hit these questions by Nestor and Pilgrim, another fellow altered community member who is doing great work out there, especially in the lore section. And I'm going to say right now that Nestor and Pilgrim knows way more about the lore than Jordan and I do.
For sure.
So I will find links to anything Nestor and Pilgrim is working on and try and toss them in the description down below for you to check out.
Yeah, if we were all in the Bravos, they would be the veteran that we're the squire to their veteran.
100%. So they've asked a question for us for every faction. So the Bravos question that we have here is, what do you think it says about the faction that no decisions have been made via the Parliament of Ashes in Haven for many years? And I wonder what event in the future will drive the faction to use this organizational body again. And Jordan, we talked about this a little bit before the episode. I thought you had a pretty good answer to this, so why don't you go for it?
Yeah, so I guess my best theory is that at this point, since the Bravos are, they're more doers rather than debaters or, thinkers. They're just like, we see a problem, we strive to fix it immediately. That maybe just a governing body like this just isn't needed most of the time, because anytime a problem arises, it gets fixed. And it also might be due to the fact that since they've been around longer, the ideals are just so instilled in the people in general that it's, they don't need a higher power above them to be like, hey, you need to keep doing this, because it's just so ingrained in who they are as a people that they just get it done before it escalates to the point of needing intervention. That would be my best guess.
I think, it's interesting. I think thinking again about this Bravos perspective of, again, selfish is a negative connotation way of saying it, but like of personal responsibility, I guess, is the way I like to think about it. Where the Bravos are the ones to generally take charge. They are a faction of leaders. And if any faction is going to not use their body of many equal-footed people who all get fair input into things, it's probably going to be the faction where everyone naturally leans towards and appreciates this concept of one person sort of leading the way, So I kind of feel like the Parliament of Ashes, as the Bravos, like you said, as the Bravos have really built into their organizational ideals, really, I think what they're waiting for, I feel like they don't need it. I feel like they're waiting for that king to be crowned again, for the Kuninga to be chosen again, for the phoenix to awaken from the egg. Until then, maybe meeting just isn't productive about it. There's nothing that they need to go discuss. Like you said, they're going to do their thing. And if a bunch of people got in the room just to talk it over, I think they would all just be turning and trying to figure out, okay, wait, who's going to just lead this thing? Like, why are we sitting around discussing? Like, someone just take action here and do something. And I think that feels a lot more Bravos to me than having a parliament where, like, we're going to get to Ortis. I'm sure they've got parliaments for their parliaments. Like I guarantee they're going to be packed full of them.
They have committees Bravos, for their subcommittees.
Yeah, exactly. I don't see it as a necessary thing for the Bravos, so it makes sense to me in that respect that it hasn't been used. Because why would they even want to? That's not in their nature to want to hold a committee like that when one person can just say, "I'm experienced. This is how we're doing this," and everyone goes, "Sounds good."
Exactly.
That's a cool question. Now, some of these questions we're gonna answer more of Nestor and Pilgrim's questions than other ones. We have an Axiom one from last week, but we can't actually attack it right now because we're looking at this question. We're like, holy cow, this is This is some deep cut lore
it's
stuff.
like a cross faction.
Yeah.
Question.
So we're going to get to that one when we get to the end of the lore series in the Izmir episode, and we're going to then look back and try and reference the things that Nestor Pilgrim's asking about here. But I believe in some of these other ones, we're going to have some good questions we can answer. You can look forward to another question from Nestor Pilgrim next episode when we get to dive into Lyra. And that's going to be fun. I think there's some interesting characters in the Lyra faction. And I think I've kind of settled into they're like my second favorite faction, maybe. I don't know. It's tough, but they're fun. I like Lyra a lot. So Jordan, do you have anything else to add here, or should we put our thoughts to rest?
Nothing else I can think of at the moment.
Well, that was our Bravos faction overview then. So hope you guys enjoyed that one. I'll let Jordan lead us on in a sec, but I do want to mention, let us know in the comments below again if you have any mailbag questions for us in the future with hashtag mailbag, or if you just want to chat about the lore, about Bravos, or we got something wrong, which is 100% possible, then go ahead and let us know in the comments down below. We'd love to hear from you. Now, Jordan, why don't you get us out of here?
Yeah, so as the day comes to a close, those were our fleeting thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to talking with you in about 2 weeks. Bye!
Bye!